Nintendo was just granted a new patent, and it's causing a major stir in the gaming world. Imagine if a company could get a patent on the idea of a jump button or a health bar. While this isn't quite that extreme, it's raising some serious questions. Nintendo has been granted a new US patent which covers a series of gameplay mechanics that appears to be incredibly common in monster taming games. We're not talking about a brand new concept or invention. We're talking about a basic sequence of actions that seems to define how many of these games are played. The internet is telling you to be scared, and honestly, I get it. They're saying Nintendo just snagged a patent that could make thousands of games illegal, from blockbuster RPGs to your favorite indie darlings. Headlines are calling it a fundamental threat to creativity. YouTubers are cranking out videos with titles like, "Nintendo just made games illegal." The fear is real, and it's spreading fast. Everyone's worried Nintendo is about to go on a legal warpath. But are they right? I went on a deep dive into my own Steam library, looking for any game that actually breaks Nintendo's new rules. What I found is that the doomsday scenario probably isn't going to happen. Today we're going to break down what I think this patent actually means, why it has developers and gamers concerned, and what it could mean for the industry. This isn't just about Nintendo wanting to protect Pokemon, it's about the precedent it might set and the potential effect it could have on the game industry. Because what affects one genre today could influence another tomorrow. Let's get into the details of the patent itself. The US patent has caused a storm of online discussion. Many articles and YouTubers seem to have misunderstood it. The headlines often claim Nintendo patented the simple idea of summoning a creature to fight, which sounds terrifyingly broad. The reality is a bit more narrow, but that doesn't make it any less concerning. On paper, the patent doesn't cover every game where you summon a creature. It describes a very specific sequence of events clearly modeled on the battle mechanics from modern Pokemon games like Legends Arceus. Whatever. Let's walk through the specific claim. First, the patent is obviously filled with legalese and hard to follow logic. I'm going to ignore most of it and just go over this chart. If we follow it, we find it's not just summoning and fighting. It's a very particular gameplay flow. Throw an item, summon a creature, enter a battle, throw another item, capture a new creature joins your party. But while the patent is more specific than many initially reported, the core concern remains. Nintendo is patenting a combination of common mechanics. Does this mean that if any one action in the loop is changed, the patent no longer applies? Instead of throwing an item, the player drops it. Instead of a battle, your monsters have a debate. What if the creature doesn't join me after I defeat it, but instead I eat it? This is where we need to consider the bigger picture. Imagine if Mojang, back in the day, had tried to patent the specific loop of destroying a block, getting a resource, and crafting a new item. They might have tried to claim ownership over every voxel-based survival game. This is the level of concern some critics have of this patent. It raises the question of whether genre-defining mechanics, even in a specific combination, can be walled off by a single company. It's also important to get the timing right. The company cannot retroactively sue for infringement on a patent that was filed after the release of the product. This patent application was filed in March 2023, before Palworld became a global phenomenon. However, its approval now, while Nintendo is in a legal battle with Palworld, gives the company a new tool in its ongoing efforts to protect its intellectual property. This patent could allow them to shift arguments from "your monsters look like our monsters" to "the way your game plays infringes on our patent," which we've already seen with the recent forced change to gliding in Palworld, from a PAL to a glider due to Nintendo's previous patent. This is a concerning development for many in the industry. It's a move that appears designed not just to protect an existing franchise, but to create a legal minefield around it. So what could this mean for other games? The approval of this patent has created a wave of uncertainty that extends beyond just one of Pokemon's competitors. It casts a shadow over the whole industry and creates a legal gray area for anyone making creature collection mechanics in their games. A prime example is Temtem, an indie multiplayer game where you catch and battle creatures. Its core gameplay is throwing an item to summon a Tem, battling an opponent, then throwing another item to capture it. Directly mirrors the process described in the patent. This puts the game's developers on very shaky ground. And this threat is very real. Nintendo has a long, aggressive history of protecting its intellectual property. They are famous for shutting down fan games, suing emulator creators for millions, and demanding removal of their games from charity speedrunning events. Their past actions show they aren't afraid to use their lawyers to shut down anything they see as a threat. What about the big established franchises? Could games like Digimon or Shin Megami Tensei and its spin-off Persona be at risk? These series have coexisted with Pokemon for decades and have their own distinct mechanics, like negotiation with demons in Shin Megami Tensei. Is this distinct enough from the patent's language? I think so. The lack of an item being thrown means the beginning of the patented loop isn't started. But the question is whether a studio would be willing to risk millions in a legal battle with Nintendo to prove it. This is what's known as the chilling effect, where the mere threat of legal action can stifle creativity. While it's unlikely Nintendo would target these established companies, the breadth of the patent's language is exactly what causes concern. The ambiguity itself is a powerful tool. Another really strange part is how the patent's generic language could even be interpreted to somewhat describe other Nintendo games, like Pikmin, where you throw an item, the Pikmin themselves, that then start a battle. However, the lack of the enemy joining you after the battle seems to mean it would be unaffected. This just highlights the absurdity of trying to patent such a general gameplay concept. So who will really be affected by this new patent? Not just Palworld and Temtem, but every indie developer working on their dream project who might now think twice. The patent could poison the well for an entire genre, restricting creativity and innovation. It is understandable to protect your intellectual property. This, however, is seen by many as an attempt to control an industry. I think the best way to respond to a company trying to wall off a genre is to celebrate everything that exists outside those walls. That's what I try to do here. I make a point to explore and champion all the weird, wonderful, and innovative creature collecting games that aren't Pokemon. If you want to join me on the journey and discover some amazing new games, consider subscribing. Now let's talk about the system that allowed this to happen. So how did we get here? How can a company patent a gameplay loop that feels so familiar? The answer seems to lie in a combination of a patent system that many experts feel is flawed and Nintendo's own well-documented history of aggressive IP protection. First, let's talk about the Patent Office. The US Patent and Trademark Office has been criticized for years for how it handles software and game patents. Some legal experts have called the granting of patents like this an embarrassing failure of the system. The issue often is that patent examiners may not be familiar with the video game industry at all. As a result, broad patents can get approved because the examiner may not be aware of prior art, examples of the idea already existing in the public domain. Once a patent is granted, it's presumed valid, and the burden of proof shifts to others to challenge it, which can be incredibly expensive. Nintendo knows that the threat of a lawsuit is often enough to deter competition, regardless of whether the patent would actually hold up in court. This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. Things like Namco's interactive loading screen patent or the Crazy Taxi Arrow patent. The most infamous example is Warner Bros. Patent on the Nemesis system from the Shadow of Mordor games. It was a fantastic system where enemies remembered you and had their own social hierarchy. When Warner Bros. Patented it, it effectively stopped other developers from experimenting with similar systems. The Nemesis system patent worked. It halted innovation in that mechanic for the whole industry. What Nintendo has done is arguably broader. The Nemesis system was a relatively novel and complex mechanic. Nintendo's patent covers a sequence of actions that is far more fundamental to an entire genre. While this also means it could be more vulnerable to a legal challenge based on decades of prior art, to pursue that challenge would be more costly than most developers could ever consider. Let's try to see this from the game developer's perspective. Imagine you've spent years working on your passion project, a new monster taming game with a unique twist. Then you read that Nintendo has been granted a patent that broadly describes your game's core loop. What do? Your dream project now feels like a legal liability. You know your game is different, but can you afford to spend millions of dollars in court to prove it against a massive corporation? Probably not. This forces a terrible choice. You could continue and risk a cease and desist letter that could bankrupt you, or you could abandon the project, or maybe you try to design around the patent. The patent mentions throwing an item, so maybe your character just holds it instead. What if they roll it? What if they bend over and shoot it out of their ass? You'd be forced to make design choices not based on what's fun, but based on what's legally defensible. This is the very definition of a chilling effect. Innovation gets replaced by fear, creativity is sidelined by risk assessment. Just think of how many brilliant games we will never see because the developer gave up. Nintendo might never even have to enforce his patent in court. Its mere existence is a powerful deterrent, especially for the small indie studios that are often the source of the most exciting new ideas in the industry. This patent sends a clear message to indie developers. This genre is ours. Do not compete with us here. This can lead to stagnation, with fewer risks being taken and fewer new ideas being explored. And if this becomes a trend, what's to stop other big companies from doing the same? What if a publisher tried to patent the basic loop of a kart racer, or the core formula of a Souls-like? This is the precedent that has so many people worried. It could lead to a future where the very building blocks of game design are carved up and owned by corporations, a future that is bleak for developers and players alike. However, with all that said, at this moment, it doesn't seem many games actually would qualify for infringement. Other than Palworld and Temtem, I only found 2 more games I felt also could apply: Pelago and the Capture Worlds. These are both very small indie games, likely from solo devs, that are no longer even updated. With these 2 included, that brings our total on Steam to 4. Just 4. Much less than I thought by a huge margin. I went through almost 400 games with creature collection mechanics, expecting to find dozens of offenders. I thought I would be struggling through making a 6-hour video. It is definitely possible I missed some here and there, but from what I can tell, there are only 4 that, if released today, would infringe on the patent. But hold on a second. The Capture Worlds is very important to this timeline. The Capture World is an indie creature taming game that was released on April 20th, 2018, almost 4 years before Pokemon Legends Arceus came out in January 2022. This means that the core gameplay loop described in Nintendo's patent, throw an item, summon a creature, battle, throw another item, capture, and have a new creature join, already existed in a publicly released game, well before Nintendo filed the patent. In other words, this mechanic wasn't a new invention. The Capture World acts as prior art, showing that the sequence was already in use in the wild. Hell, this game looks like a weird alpha to Legends Arceus. This undercuts the claim that Nintendo's patent represents a truly novel gameplay idea. True innovation happens through iteration, with developers building upon the ideas of others. Pokemon itself wasn't created in a vacuum, it built upon years of other RPGs. For Nintendo to now use its power to potentially wall off that creative space feels profoundly damaging to the gaming ecosystem. This sets a troubling precedent. It could normalize the patenting of gaming mechanics, leading to a future where creativity is stifled by legal threats. That's a future with fewer games, less innovation, and ultimately less fun for everyone. It speaks volumes that legal experts, including the former chief legal officer of the Pokemon Company, have expressed skepticism about the patent's strength and criticized the system that allowed it. This is a fight for the creative spirit of gaming. It's a question of whether game mechanics should be open for creators to build upon or locked away in corporate vaults. The outcry over the Warner Bros. Nemesis patent showed that players care about these issues. By supporting small developers and speaking out, we can let companies know that we don't want a future where creativity is patented out of existence. So I'll leave you with this question. Where do you draw the line between protecting an invention and a company trying to own a genre? And what game mechanic are you most worried could be next on the chopping block? Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe for more deep dives into weird, forgotten monster taming games you've never heard of. I don't plan to cover news, but this one was close to home, so I couldn't help myself. This is my first ever video. You couldn't tell. It took so long to figure out how to do all this stuff. So thank you again, and have a beautiful day.